ain't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Eevee and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Ernie, the Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. Alright, so today's video, we're going to be talking about Uncanny X-Men number 8, which is the finale of the Raid on Graymalkin story arc. There is a lot to get into, so I don't want to stand on ceremony. Let's get into the damn comic. And the first thing that is coming straight out of the gate, and this is something that was actually teased in the solicits and previews, but we saw that, you know, Scurvy Phillip and Charles Xavier were going to have a little bit of a back and forth this issue, and we get to see it all play out. But one of the main things that comes up during the conversation that I feel is going to have a lot of people scratching their heads is the revelation of a new classification of mutant. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see on that one. Phillip implies that while he and Charles have never met, that Charles and Phillip share something tied to their powers. They are considered avians. Now, I know what you're thinking, not bird people, but I feel like this is just a terminology that's used to explain maybe why these characters are elevated and away from the normal classification of mutant. Not necessarily meaning, oh, hey, they're Omega level, but also not, you know, discrediting the abilities that they have. I feel like if you just, you know, because I know some people love to think in binaries, if you just had, and technically there's more than, you know, two classifications of mutants, but the thing is, if you just have to think in binaries, if you have to think in tribalism terms, if you had to think between the distance between an alpha mutant and an Omega level mutant, I feel like an avian is somewhere like in the middle, but way off to the side doing something else. That's what this feels like. Now, the thing that these avians probably all have in common with one another is that they are powerful telepaths of some sort, some type of a psionic. We already see that Charles Xavier and Scurvy, they are both not only telepaths, but very similar in appearance, which I guess explains why so many people thought that Scurvy was Professor X back during the early days of the From the Ashes era announcements. But we also got to take into account Harvey X, who was in his own right a powerful psionic, but more in terms of clairvoyance, as well as also having a healing factor, but that's another story altogether. These characters all have some kind of mental abilities. You can think of it as a consultation prize for being one of the most powerful characters in all of existence, at least in terms of mutants, but not having the classification of Omega level. But this isn't the happy, fun, brag about it in comic shops type of power level distinction. It comes with a brain tumor, a deadly brain tumor at that, hence why Harvey X is in the upper room right now. Charles apparently never knew, and it's not something that has ever come up for him in all of his years, but it's likely because it's something that is currently developing now, so maybe it wouldn't have been caught so long ago. And I don't know what's to explain how aggressive or how, you know, laid back this brain tumor might be, because we have to think about the fact it's what killed Harvey X, and it was something that was incurable, inoperable, and yeah, he just had to go through it until he inevitably expired, which he did in Uncanny X-Men number 1. Now, the kicker is that, yes, this brain tumor is already there within Charles, same as it is for Scurvy Phillip, and it is killing both of them, though Charles seems to not be feeling the effects of it quite yet, but I think that might actually be more the reason why when we got to the end of the whole, you know, House of X era with, you know, X-Men number 35 or Legacy number X-Men number 700, whatever you want to call it. When we got to the end of that and Charles Xavier went catatonic, I initially thought maybe it had to do with Scurvy Phillip, which could technically still be the case, but maybe it was also something to do with that brain tumor. Either way, this is what killed Harvey X. None of the best treatment in the Marvel Comics universe could save him, though I do find it of note Storm literally went through this whole process of, you know, giving up her ruby that belonged to her mother so that X-Men could be treated at the Night and Day Clinic. So part of me wonders if that's going to pay dividends somewhere down the road. Like, is this going to be one of those situations where Charles is going to be able to get rid of that brain tumor because Storm, you know, basically gave up something that, you know, meant a whole heap of a lot to her? in that particular moment. If you don't know what I'm talking about, there'll be a link for it up here. Charles is not long for this earth one way or the other, and what's wild about this is that Philip speaks as though he knows the other avians, saying that they never wanted to be a part of his bloody wars, his crusade to fight for mutant rights, seemingly wanting to sit it out and just simply exist, which is funny considering Harvey didn't seem to share this same sentiment. Harvey actually seemed more interested in helping mutant kind and wanting to take a more active stance, but because of his brain tumor and his illness, he couldn't actively do anything about it. So that's one of those scenarios where I feel like Scurvy is just talking out of his ass here, or rather, he's making assumptions about the others. He probably is aware of the others, but just doesn't know anything really about the others. Maybe save for one of the other mysterious members, because as we said, there are 5 of these guys, not just Scurvy, not just Harvey, not just Xavier. There are 5 total of these avians, and one of the 2 that we have not met yet, we know exactly where they are, and it's Inmate X. Inmate X is one of the avians, but sadly, we do not get to see Inmate X in this. Inmate X is basically kind of held over our head like the little carrot, to lead us on, but ultimately, we're not going to see the character. We're not really going to get much of a tease about the character outside of the fact that they are an avian and that they are still behind that door, and that Dr. Karina Ellis is holding the Inmate X character like it's the ace of spades. Now, while I'm disappointed by this move to not reveal Inmate X, I feel like what's happening here is that Inmate X is being saved for X Manhunt. I feel like that's probably where we're really gonna see all of that play out, and which is fine. I'm perfectly okay with that. It's just that I would have liked to have seen just a little bit more. Like, I'm not saying I needed to see Inmate X or even, know who they are. It would have been nice, though, to get, like, kind of like how, and comics still do this. I don't know why I'm talking about this like it's some bygone era where comics don't do this anymore, but kind of like almost how you would see more commonly back in the day, where a character would make their first appearance, but it wouldn't be a full appearance. They would just hang back in the cut, and, they might say something like off panel. You might see their face, but it's completely overshadowed, so you don't really see entirely what they look like. I was kind of hoping for something like that with Inmate X, like maybe Dr. Ellis walks up to the door and like we can hear Inmate X from the other side, or maybe we get like a glimpse like of a hand or something. Like, that's what I was hoping for. Like honestly, at the maximum, that is what I was hoping for. I didn't really truly expect Inmate X to be unveiled this early. Like, it was something that, especially based on some things Tom Brevoort has said, the editor of the X Office, it basically kind of let me know that this is something that's going to be kind of drug out for a bit. Now that I've talked about Inmate X, there is still another elephant in the room, and it's that, well, okay, that's 4 avians. Who is the 5th one? And I think the reason why there's not really much mention of a 5th avian, or even any allusions to a 5th avian, is because it's probably no secret who the character is. I'm not saying this is who this is, but I mean, this would just make the most sense. I feel like it's Cassandra Nova, because, well, for one, we haven't seen Inmate X yet, but just based on the 3 avians that we have seen named thus far, they all have very similar properties. They're all bald white dudes. Harvey X, bald white dude. Charles, bald white dude. Scurvy Philip, bald white dude. Who's to say that one of the other avians couldn't be a bald white woman? And considering the fact that Cassandra Nova is Charles Xavier's twin sister, albeit one he strangled in the womb, and also became a weird Shi'ar nightmare monster entity later on, that's another story altogether. Still, I think that's probably the case. It's not like Cassandra Nova isn't hanging around. She's been running around with 3K, and we've seen her very recently in Jed MacKay's X-Men series. If you haven't caught up with any of that, you can check it out up here. All in all, this issue closes out the raid on Graymalkin's story arc, and I think it did so very satisfactorily. I enjoyed what I read. I thought that it did a pretty good job. It had its hiccups, I think. I recognize it for being, a pretty good story arc and a nice, I guess, beginner for, because this isn't, well, technically is the first crossover of the X-Men from the Ashes era. I think the real first crossover of the From the Ashes era is going to be X Manhunt. That's going to be the real big crossover for the X-Men, you know, in this new era. This raid on Graymalkin was just to whet the appetite. And I also do appreciate that while, yes, there were superhero shenanigans, like, you know, superheroes who are on the same side fighting each other. There was that. But I do also appreciate this was at least attempted to be kept a battle of ideologies and not just misunderstandings. For the most part, you know, while yes, there was a scurvy Philip thing, like messing with everyone's minds, but at the end of the day, you know, Rogue and Cyclops are not friendly with each other by the time we get to the end of this. That is one thing that I thought was an interesting choice. I actually thought that this would wrap up with everybody being on the same side by the time we get to the end of it, but I think that little, you know, happy ending is being saved for the end of X-Men Hunt, because we do know that there is going to be an all-new X-Men title coming out later. This is something that's being teased in the free comic book day issues that are coming out. There's an issue that's teasing the gang being back at the mansion, and that it almost kind of seems like there's only going to be one X-Men team, but who knows? We haven't gotten there yet. It was in a solicit for a book that's not coming out till May 4th, and that very book that comes out on May 4th is basically a preview for some shit that's probably going to happen 2 or 3 months down the road. So we don't know yet. It's one of those things that we just going to have to be patient and wait, let them cook, all that shit. Getting back to Cyclops and Rogue, the thing I found of note you know, with their dynamic in this is the fact that, you know, we still have that issue of what Rogue wants to do about Charles Xavier and what Cyclops wants to do about Charles Xavier. The fact that the two characters have very different ideas about who Charles is as a person in this moment and whether or not he deserves to be saved or to be left to rot. And right now, Rogue is the one who, because, and then she even says it in this issue, that he's like a father to her. He was the first person who ever gave her a fair chance on the X-Men, because I do remember those old issues back after Rogue had left Mystique and Destiny, after the whole debacle with Rogue accidentally taking Ms. Marvel's powers back in the day. And I totally get that. I totally understand where Rogue is coming from. She's seeing Charles as a father and she wants to save him. She thinks that regardless of what he's done, whether she's fully aware or not, I feel like she should be, but I'll talk more about that here in a minute. I feel like she has just said, past sins be damned. He has to be saved. No one deserves to be locked away in a place like Graymalkin. And if you don't know why, you check out this video up here. I also see Cyclops' side of it too, because he had a conversation with Charles when Charles decided to throw in his lot with Orcus. And he saw Charles at his absolute worst. And he, well, yes, he looks to Charles as a father as well, and he has for longer than any of the other X-Men mostly can say. He also has seen Charles at his worst multiple times, and this one siding with the enemy, the people who want to subjugate all life in the universe under one banner. He saw Charles throw in his lot for this, all in service of his dream, or rather a perverted version of it. And Cyclops, he took that personal. He's not standing idly by and letting Xavier walk away. And that is something I will say, you know, because we're kind of later into this video. If you're still up at this point, you clearly know we're talking about spoilers, but Charles does not escape in this. I actually thought Charles would get free, but it does make sense considering X-Men Hunt doesn't start until March, that he's gonna stay right put where he is. Dr. Ellis basically makes it clear that she will destroy everything that the X-Men care about. She will destroy Merle, Alaska. She has a satellite with a massive laser trained to nuke the site from orbit. She also has Haven targeted, the home of the Uncanny X-Men. And the funny part about that is, you would think, well, wait a minute, why would she care if they destroyed Haven? Well, the reason why is because it's not just the home that is there, which, to be fair, there are people, regular humans, living in that home, but also the surrounding areas around Haven. So yes, we're talking about two cities harboring mutants that will get nuked off the face of the planet. So yeah, this is why the X-Men back down from this situation. But at the end of the day, it's still this wedge between Rogue and Cyclops. In moments where, and I love the double duty that Gale is doing here, because it would be very easy for people to say that, oh, Rogue and Cyclops, they hate each other now, and they're big mad at each other, and it's this huge big to do. I could see where you might think that they're being irrational between one another, but I think that's kind of the funny part about this, is that it's also showing that well, yes, Rogue thinks I'll never be like you, Cyclops. The thing is, they think alike in a lot of ways. The trick is that they're two sides of the same coin. Rogue, and I've talked about this before in regards to the difference between the Uncanny and the Adjectiveless X-Men books. Gail Simone's Uncanny X-Men is more like a family book. It's a book about a found family working together, striving together to fight for their survival, but also they're not trying to be some type of militant, mutant freedom force. Cyclops' side, over on Jed MacKay's Adjectiveless X-Men, that is where that's the case. Cyclops' team, well, yes, they're a found family, no different than the Uncanny X-Men squad by Gale. They're more militant. They're a freedom force. They're a freedom force first, then they're a found family. This is a mission. And I also find it interesting, too, that Rogue even calls out, like, there's different things that they call out about one another that I will say do seem very contradictory. The fact that Cyclops calls out Rogue for bringing children into the fight against Graymalkin, considering what Cyclops did during Schism and what he was willing to do during, all the other X books after that. Kind of funny for Cyclops to take that moral high ground, but also same to Rogue for taking the moral high ground about siding with Magneto when she knows that Magneto is not the person who he used to be back, like, in the day. I don't know, that would, like, that's, like, if there's any, like, a criticism I have about this book, or at least this issue specifically, it's that. And it might even be on purpose, because I talk about this all the time. Just because something doesn't make sense, in the grand scheme of the canon, doesn't mean that it's a mistake. It could just as easily be like real life. When two people argue with one another, sometimes some irrational shit gets said. And while I know it might seem like, oh, I'm trying to make excuses for it, but I mean, think about it. There have been times where, and I'm pretty sure you guys have had it too, you've argued with someone who you care about, and you're arguing about something that you think is important, the other person thinks is important, but then you're gonna start saying things that just don't add up. Like, they're not true. Or even if they are true, they're not as true as you're saying they are. Like, there might be like a half-truth involved. And I feel like that's what's going on here. This is like mirroring like an actual familial dispute where Rogue and Cyclops have kind of lost the plot on what they're even arguing about in a lot of respects. Or even lost the plot on the fact that they are more similar than they might want to believe. I will say that the star of this comic, and this is to the surprise of no one, is the social commentary. It's an X-Men book. What do you expect? Would you thought this was like some anti-woke, anti-political comic like Captain America? If you get it, you get it. But no, the political and social commentary here, the fact that Scurvy Phillip is a mutant who seems to be quite self-hating. The fact that he's a mutant working for an anti-mutant bigot and willingly, even to the point where it's revealed that he and Dr. Ellis, the reason why she actually, and I thought this was very interesting, I think this is the thing that people are really gonna kind of skip over, the reason why she seems to tolerate him talking to her a certain way more than any other mutant, despite the fact that she full sail hates mutants. She hates mutants. Oh, trust me, she hates mutants. Dr. Karina Ellis is basically the racist white man who has a black girlfriend or wife. You always hear these stories, and these are real things that happen, but you hear about these people who are racist and they try and use, oh, well, I'm dating a black woman, or I'm married to a black person, or, whatever. They use that as a shield, but at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, you can still do that. And you can still very much be racist. I would even go as far as say it's almost like Dr. Ellis hates mutants so much that she fetishizes them, or at the very least is more than willing to sleep with them to get what she wants out of them. And it seems like that's exactly what she did. Because there is, I feel like, no actual love or affection. It almost seems like she's only really doing what she's doing, or did what she did with Philip to just get him sprung. And she only had to lay it on him one time, and he is gone to the mutant equivalent of the sunken place. I feel like right now, Scurvy Phillip is the type of dude to be like, Yeah, I don't know what's going on with these muties. I blame the lack of fathers in the home. Yeah, I got out the mansion. Why can't y'all get out the mansion? Or he's like, oh yeah, you know, mutants used to make fun of me, you know, back when I was growing up. So now I only exclusively date human women. That's basically what he's doing right now. That's basically what he's doing right now. Yeah, I feel like he needs to learn to love himself. Yeah, I think I think he needs to learn to love himself. Yeah. Yeah, self-hate's a motherfucker. It is.